All right, chums up, men. Let's do this. Welcome back to the Sleeping Tiger channel. I am the Canadian Asian, and I really just wanted to take a moment to talk about one metric that is, in my opinion, pretty influential when it comes to purchasing real estate. And I've had several people ask me in the last few days, um, what are some things I look at when analyzing rental properties? And so, you know, a lot of people will talk about return on investment, ROI, cash ROI, how much money should you be expecting cash wise versus your complete ROI, which would in fact factor in, you know, tax benefits and capital pay down, into the property so that you can build up equity. And so it really just depends on what you're looking for. But me particularly, I plan on holding properties forever. I don't ever plan on really selling them. Um, in fact, I typically what I would do is a cash out refinance. But with cash out refinances, there's a strategy to it, and there's a lot of the way I do it, there's a lot of math that's involved to make sure that the property is still highly profitable and has a really good cash return, and that it's tailored to the market that you're in, because every market is different when it comes to rents and how much you can charge, and that is highly important to determining whether or not the property is feasible. Okay, but one thing you could always look at is the cap rate. And typically, cap rates are something that people who purchase multifamily homes do a lot more research into, because the cap rate helps determine the price for a multifamily home. Because most houses are priced based off of recent sales history when we're talking residential. And so demand for those houses also influences the price. Okay, if demand's high, prices go up. Now, with multifamily homes, they're not always selling as much as residential homes. So you have to defer back to cap rate, because that tells you how much the property is worth. It tells you what it can generate. And so the simplest way to talk about it is that the cap rate is the amount of money you would return on your investment if you paid for it in full in cash. I think would be the best way I would describe it, okay? So, for instance, let's say you have a property and it is $215,000. In my example, I put a down payment of 35%. That's not necessary, but sometimes I would do that to lower the monthly expenditure caused by the mortgage. That way it becomes more feasible for the amount of rent I'm charging. Okay, that's just something I do because I'm a very conservative investor when it comes to rental properties. I want to make sure that I have the option to lower rents in order to make sure I can keep that property, and it reduces the burden or the hardship should that property go without a tenant longer. Okay. So what we're looking right here is the NOI, or not net operating income, which is determined by your rental income less your total monthly expenses, and that gives you your operating income, okay? Then you multiply that by 12, because you're assuming you're measuring in a year, okay? And that gives you your overall net operating income. You take that over the total expense. Okay, so what you paid for the property. This is inaccurate. I put property value there, but it's the total expense. So let's say you purchase the property for $215 and it requires some repairs. You need to factor that into this number, okay? When you take that over it, that gives you your cap rate. All right? Then you take your cap rate and you divide that by your net operating income, and it could give you an estimated property value. All right? Now, when I say estimated property value, the reason why I bring that up is because right here, you can see in my equation, I have a 0.0681. That represents a percentage. That percentage is my desired return on investment, okay? Now, you can see that right now, as this property stands in this example, it does not hit that desired number, Okay, it's 5.38%, which in my opinion is still a really good return on investment, okay? Because this is based off of a snapshot in a single year, right? Where you haven't increased rents. You don't have any, typically expenses don't go down, they go up. But let's say, for instance, in this example, we have this operating expense here. It has a factor of repairs and vacancy into it. Let's say the tenant that's in there is been there for a year and they're going to be a long-term tenant and they're going to continue to rent that property. Maybe they sign on for a 2-year lease. You can actually reduce your expenses by cutting out that vacancy expense because you've already achieved that buffer that you have on that property. So that would lower your expenses, but typically things like taxes and insurance, they tend to go up, okay? But also to that coin, you also usually tend to raise rents, okay? Some people do it more aggressive than others. It's just depending on who you are. So I would say your cap rate tends to go up over time, okay? Because your rents will increase more usually than your expenses will go up, okay? So that being said, 5.38% is good for me for a cap rate. And that is one metric I use to determine whether or not I'm going to invest heavily into a property. And the reason why I say that is because in a market with increasing property values, it's really hard to find those real sweet deals where you just go in, you buy it, you bid it up, you get it, you do a little fixing up, and then you rent it out for an ungodly sum of money because the market is really hot right now. So I focus more on this metric more than before because it shows me what my estimated return on value is if I had just straight cash, if I had just millions of dollars available to me for disposable income and just plow it into a property instead of taking one out with a mortgage. So it removes a veil of that mortgage being there to determine whether or not a house is profitable, truly profitable. Okay, sometimes a mortgage can blind you to whether or not you're making a good investment because you don't have to have all that upfront cash all at once. So in another video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the idea that you can always take out a mortgage. Okay, if you have a property that has some equity in it, a lot of people talk about refinancing or doing a cash out refi or getting a lower interest rate. There's this idea that you can always take out a mortgage. And typically you can, as long as there's equity in it. But there's other factors that you need to take into consideration, like rising house prices, lowering interest rates, and the length of the loan. How long have you been paying on this loan? Are you really giving up a lot of time? Because typically they're going to push that maturity date out. So there's other factors to take into consideration. And another way to purchase a house, because I wanted to tag this on to my FHA video, which was house hacking and that principle and that method to purchasing houses. So all those things being said, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of close out this video because I really just want to keep it focused around this idea of cap rate and how I use it to make judgments on properties. And let me know in the comments if you guys want me to go into more detail about the function of cap rate with multifamily homes, like apartments, duplexes, sevenplexes. Typically, people don't bother using cap rates to determine a property's value until you get above a fourplex, just because the market for duplexes is pretty closely tied to like residential properties. Okay. Anyways, you guys have a great day.